The fire was still burning when Callum spotted the wreckage. It was late. August 1873 in Montana Territory. Callum had been riding along Dry Creek when the smell of smoke stopped him. His horse snorted, uneasy. The air shimmered with heat. Ash floated in the wind like dark snowflakes. Callum pulled his horse to a stop and looked down the slope. The wagon was ruined, blackened wood and twisted metal. The wheels had burned down to the rims. No horses, no supplies. Only the bitter, the smell of burnt canvas, and the sad wreck of a traveler's life. Then he saw her, a woman, lying next to the burned wagon, barely moving. One arm was over her face, trying to block the sun. The other clutched her ribs. Her dress was torn and dirty, her lips cracked from thirst. But her eyes were open wide, wild and alive. Without a word, Callum swung down from his saddle.
Nice.
Boots crunched on the scorched ground as he approached her. "You hurt bad?" he asked, voice low and steady. She tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. Callum took his canteen from his belt and held it to her lips. She drank, trembling. "Name?" He asked. "Olive," she whispered. "Olive Norin." She winced as she tried to sit up, her arm held tight to her side. Ribs cracked. She gasped. "Fire, ... Came too fast. Come, save anything." Callum looked at the wreckage again. No one else was there. Ash and silence. "You traveling alone?" he asked. She shook her head slightly, but the movement brought fresh pain to her face. "My uncle. He went ahead to find water. Took the rifle. I stayed. They came. Lit the wagon, ... Took the horse. Left me." Callum's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who they were. Out here, too many men took what wasn't theirs. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. She gave a faint nod, but her strength was fading fast. "I'm taking you out of here," Callum said firmly. "My cabin's half a day's ride. We'll go slow." She hesitated. Her eyes searched his face. "You got a choice?" he asked. She looked at him closely now. His skin was dark from sun and wind, his jaw rough with stubble. His green eyes were calm and sure. No false comfort, no soft words, only truth. "No," she said. Callum bent and carefully lifted her. She gasped from the pain but didn't resist. He carried her to his horse and placed her gently in the saddle. Then he mounted up behind her, one arm strong around her waist to hold her steady. They rode in silence. The trail was long and empty. The prairie stretched wide under the burning sun. Only the creak of leather and Olive's quiet gasps broke the stillness. "You have family nearby?" Callum asked after a while. "No, just my uncle. We were going to Helena. He said there was work. We wanted to start again." Wanted. Answer, he knew what it meant to start again, what it could cost. The land rolled out before them, open and dry. Distant mountains rose like blue shadows on the horizon. "Why are you helping me?" Olive asked softly. Callum didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, quiet as the wind, "Because someone should have." By late afternoon, they reached his land, a small cabin, a barn, and a corral tucked between two ridges. Pines stood tall around the place, giving some shelter from the wind. Callum brought the horse to a stop. "Can you stand?" he asked. "I think so." He dismounted and helped her down. Her legs were shaky. She gripped his shirt until she could stand on her own. "I'll get you inside." He led her into the cabin. The room was plain wooden walls, a stone fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and 1 narrow bed, clean and quiet. He helped her sit on the edge of the bed. "Stay put," he said. "I'll get water. I'll take care of those ribs." She watched him move about the room. He was quiet, steady, no rush, no fear. "You a doctor?" she asked weakly. "No, just know what pain looks like." He cleaned her face and arms with a damp cloth, his touch gentle. Later, after a warm cup of broth, Olive lay back on the bed. Her body ached. Her heart felt heavy with loss. But for now, she was alive. Callum pulled a blanket over her. "Rest. I'll be nearby." "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer, just sat in a chair near the door, watching over her. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines. Inside, Olive lay awake in the quiet cabin. The ache in her chest loosened a little. She was not alone. Not anymore. Olive woke early. The light through the small cabin window was gray and soft. Her body ached, her ribs still sharp with pain, but her mind felt clearer than before. The fire crackled low in the hearth. A blanket was tucked around her, warm and comforting. She heard movement outside. The sound of an axe striking wood, again and again, steady and sure. She sat up slowly, biting her lip as pain pulled at her side. The blanket slipped down. Her torn sleeve had been sewn with careful stitches, rough but neat. Someone had taken the time. The door creaked open. Callum stepped in, boots dusty, shirt damp with sweat. "You're awake," he said, setting the axe by the door. "I heard you chopping," she replied, voice soft but stronger than yesterday. 6. No, 7 logs by the sound of it. Small smile flickered at the corner of Callum's mouth. One was twisted. It took longer. He crossed the room and poured dark coffee into a tin cup. He handed it to her. Barley coffee. Not much taste, but warm. She took the cup with both hands. Her fingers brushed his, rough and calloused. "I can do more than sit," she said after a sip. "You don't have to carry the whole day alone." Callum leaned against the wall, his pale green eyes steady. "You tell me what you can manage, I'll listen. I can peel potatoes," she offered.
Yes.
"If you have any." 2 left. "Bit soft, but they'll boil fine." That earned another small smile from him. He fetched the sack and placed it on the table, along with a knife. She sat carefully, moving slow, and began to peel. Her hands steady, her breath measured. "Where'd you learn to cook?" Callum asked, watching her work. "First job I ever had," Olive said. "Cook's tent outside Cheyenne, 20 ranch hands to feed. The cook quit after a week. I stayed. Nearly a year." She gave a faint smile. "Spurned the biscuits twice. Learned quick after that." Callum added water to a pot and set it over the fire. "You get paid fair?" he asked. $5 a month and a cot." He nodded. "That's light wages. I was 17, didn't know better." She looked at him. "You ever leave?" "Montana?" "Once. To Salt Lake. Freighting cattle." "What made you come back?" He was quiet for a moment. "Didn't like the feel of the land under my boots there. I know these hills. Know where the water runs, where it doesn't. That matters." She nodded. "It does." For a while they worked in easy silence. The smell of boiling broth filled the cabin. Then Callum spoke again. "You planning to stay long?" Olive looked down. "I hadn't thought past yesterday," she admitted softly. "I don't have anywhere I need to be." He stirred the pot, quiet. "There's room here, if you want it." She looked up. "What would I owe you?" "Nothing." She shook her head. "I don't believe in nothing anymore." Callum met her gaze. "Then call it a trade. Keep things straight, I'll keep us fed," she thought. For a moment, then nodded once. "All right." Later that day, Olive sat on the stoop, wrapped in a shawl. The sun dipped low, turning the dust to gold. Callum was fixing a fence rail near the barn. She watched him move strong, steady, alert, always listening, always aware. When he finished, he joined her on the stoop. "You don't talk much," Olive said. "No need to fill the air," he replied. "I'm not used to the quiet. You might learn to like it." The ridge, where the sky was soft and pale. Maybe. They sat together, silent as the evening deepened. The first stars began to show. The wind whispered through the pines. In that quiet moment, Olive felt something she hadn't known in a long time, a small, fragile peace. She wasn't alone in the world anymore. Not here, not with him. Frost came early that year. By the second week of September, mornings were cold and sharp. A thin layer of white frost covered the fence posts and the tops of the grass. Breath showed in the air like smoke. Callum rose before dawn each day, chopped firewood and brought it in, stacking it by the hearth. The cabin stayed warm through the cold nights. Olive still moved slow, but her ribs had started to heal. Each day, she could do a little more. She kept the fire going, cooked meals, and swept the cabin. She even began warming stones by the hearth. tucking them into the bed before nightfall. That afternoon, Olive stood behind the barn. She watched the sky. A hawk circled high above the ridge. Her shawl was tight around her shoulders. Cold air brushed her face. Footsteps sounded behind her. Callum walked up, a coil of rope on one shoulder, a spade in hand. "It's not a grave," Olive said before he could ask. Callum followed her gaze. Yet, near the pines was a small mound of earth. "I didn't think it was," he said quietly. "It's where I buried my locket. It was my mother's. After the fire, it was all I had left. I didn't feel right to keep it in a drawer. Not without her." Callum nodded. He shifted the spade to his other hand. "You want a marker?" he asked. "I thought about it," Olive said softly. "But I don't know the words yet. You will." She gave a small nod and turned back toward the cabin. Her steps were slow but steady as they neared the garden fence. Callum glanced at her hands. "You feel up to helping with the carrots?" he asked. She flexed her fingers. "As long as they're not buried too deep, they're shallow." Worked side by side, pulling the last of the carrots from the soft earth. The carrots were thick and crooked. Olive brushed off the dirt and placed them in a basket. Callum trimmed the tops. "You've kept this place going a long time," Olive said. "Long enough to know what won't survive a hard freeze." She looked out toward the ridge. "There's something you're not saying?" Callum sat back on his heels. He wiped his hands on his trousers. "There's a man who comes through this time of year, brings supplies from Fort Benton. I was going to ride out tomorrow, meet him at the crossing." He waited a moment. "He usually brings news. Sometimes letters for folks down south. I thought, maybe you'd want to write someone, or ride with me." Olive shook her head. "He wouldn't have made it this far, not without a horse." Callum's jaw tightened. But he said nothing. "I don't want to write anyone," she added. "There's no one left to write." He nodded. He stood and lifted the basket of carrots. "I'll take these in." She followed him to the porch. At the door, she paused. "Were you ever married?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. "No. Did you want to be?" He set the basket down and met her eyes. "Didn't think it was for me." She leaned against the doorframe. "Because of your brother?" Callum's gaze held hers. "Partly. The rest ... is harder to name." She stepped inside the cabin. The light from the low sun turned the dust in the air to gold. She moved to the stove and stirred the pot of stew. The smell of onion and bay leaf rose with the steam. Callum stood near the hearth. He struck a match and lit the fire. The flames grew slowly. "I lost more than my brother that year," he said at last. "We were driving cattle past the mussel shoal. He slipped in the river. I couldn't reach him. He watched the flames. After that, I couldn't think straight around people. Didn't want their pity. He didn't deserve it," Olive said gently. "No, but it came anyway." She ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table. "Sit," she said. "Eat before it cools." They ate in quiet. It was not an empty silence. It was easy, without pressure, peace in shared company. When the bowls were empty, Olive washed them. She turned to him. "You said you didn't think marriage was for you," she said. "And now?" Callum stood near the window, arms crossed, "I think I was wrong." The next morning, Olive woke to the sound of the door closing. Callum had already gone out. The air inside the cabin was cool, but the fire was still burning low. She rose carefully from the bed. The pain in her ribs had lessened. She could move. Easier now. She added kindling to the fire and set a pot of water to boil. Outside, she heard the sound of a horse being saddled. Callum was leaving to meet the supply man. She stepped to the door and pulled the shawl tight around her. The sky was pale blue, and the cold morning air sharp in her lungs. Callum glanced up as she stepped onto the porch. "You're heading out?" she asked. He nodded. "Should be back by nightfall." She hesitated, fingers gripping the edge of the shawl. "Be careful." His eyes softened. "I always am." She watched as he rode out, his figure growing smaller across the open land. The sound of hooves faded. The day passed slowly. Olive kept busy. She swept the cabin, washed clothes, and tended the fire. But her thoughts drifted. Since that terrible day by the burned wagon, things had changed. Life here was simple but steady. She and Callum had found a quiet rhythm together. He had saved her life, brought her here when he could have ridden on. Fed her, cared for her, asked for nothing, and slowly, she had begun to feel something she thought was lost. Hope. As the sun dipped low, Olive stood at the window, watching the ridge. A shape appeared in the distance, Callum riding back, a pack horse trailing behind him. She stepped out to meet him. "Everything go well?" she asked. He nodded. "Brought supplies. Some news, too." He dismounted and handed her a small bundle. "For you. Cloth and a few other things." She smiled, touched by the thought. They unpacked together, placing new flour, coffee, salt, and other goods on the shelves. At supper, they sat across from each other. The firelight danced on the walls. "There was a word about your Uncle Callum," said softly. Olive looked up, heart tight. A scout passed near Dry Creek. Found what was left. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. "I knew." Callum reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers. "I'm sorry." "Thank you," she whispered. For a time, they sat in silence. The warmth of his hand over hers, steady and kind. Later, as Olive washed the bowls, she spoke. "You told me once you didn't think marriage was for you." Callum stood by the hearth, arms resting on the mantel. "I remember. And now?" she asked again. He turned, his pale green eyes meeting hers. "Now, I'm not so sure." She dried her hands and stepped closer. "You looked after me like someone who's done it before." "I haven't, but you knew how." He moved a little closer, voice low. "You didn't flinch when I carried. You, most would have." "I didn't feel in danger," she said simply. "Still don't." He took her hand in his, strong and gentle. "I don't have fine words," he said. "But if you stay here, I'd like it to be as more than just company." She looked into his eyes. Saw no lies, no false hope, only quiet truth. "I'd like that too," she answered. The fire popped softly. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and in that small cabin, to lives that had been broken now found a way to begin again.